Hello and welcome to Animated Anarchy. This is a Minicast episode featuring Andrew and Mike. Okay, a question for you and Mike for a future podcast. As you developed your drawing skills early on in your life, did you have any books that were meant to teach you how to draw? And if you did, is there one that sticks out most in your memory? P.S. For me, it was Ed Emberley's Big Green Drawing Book.
I have never heard of that.
I actually have, but this was like... I knew about this like back in elementary school, I think. If I can like bring it up a little bit. It's like a very simplified looking thing.
Let's see.
You've seen that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like a purple one, I think, somewhere.
The big purple drawing book.
Purple drawing book. And then there was the big blue drawing book and then the big red.
Does it just teach you how to draw red and blue and pink and purple things?
Yeah, and then Bear in the big blue house and then
and Harold in the purple crayon.
Really, it was just like a simplified. It's very UPA-ish almost, like the way
flat.
Yeah, very flat, shapely,
graphic.
And then like doing like little line drawings in it.
Oh, okay.
So
I personally never heard of it.
Yeah, but I remember that book. It was really cute. It didn't teach me how to draw, but it was like a nice. It was a nice little thing to look at. It's very pretty. Okay, I'm trying to remember because there were quite a few how to draw books that I grew up with, and Christopher Hart.
No.
Listen. I know what you're gonna say, and yes. I'm not really a big fan of Christopher Hart books. I love the early ones were really nice and like cartoony. Like there was like it started off at a point where it's like how to draw cartoons, and the style of it was just like I really liked the style of the book.
Yeah,
because it was very cartoony and everything. It's like and it kept on growing. Like there were more how to draw cartoons and then cartoons. And then it starts stretching out even farther and farther. It's like how to draw anime, how to draw big robots, how to draw the Marvel way,
how to take advantage of artists to do art for your how to draw books.
And honestly, early Christopher Hart books were really good in the fact that it was actually teaching you about like composition and stuff like that.
It was a good springboard.
It was a good start. Yeah, I mean it's not a good book to like learn how to draw. I mean, I can't really say honestly that one book will honestly tell you how to draw. If someone does not know how to draw, I don't think you can really get that off of a book.
Yeah.
I think you have to have like the concept of drawing first. And then through that, it's like you develop your style and you start to feel what you're comfortable with. And it comes through osmosis, like, what you can learn off of, what you see from other things, and trying to make it into your own sort of, trying to get your own comfort zone.
Yeah.
And then it's like you start learning the basics.
Right.
Like figure and shapes and like lighting and all that sort of stuff.
I had a similar experience where I had a book. I remember I used to take it out of the library, my school library, a lot. It was like a how to draw cartoons book, and it included a lot of famous characters, but in the terms of like stuff from the 1970s before. So it was like how to draw Fred Flintstone, how to draw Popeye, how to draw Dagwood,
Yeah.
And the funny thing was, I can't remember the name of the book, but there was a series of them, or like how to draw 50 famous cartoons or something. And the problem is with those books, and I had a similar experience recently with my nephew, who wants to learn how to draw, and he knows because he's like, oh, my uncle works in animation, I want to do that, so he starts taking how to draw books, and he got this one, I guess, from one of those, bookmobile, book fairy things.
Oh God.
And he got this book, and he's like, look, I'm learning how to draw. And I said, cool, let me take a look at that book. And it teaches you how to draw the wrong way. It teaches you how to draw like an outline first. And I'm like, no. And I wasn't like trying to tell him, oh, this is wrong. I was just saying, hey, this isn't a way to approach it. But in a way, it's wrong. This is not quite the right way to do it. This is not how I draw.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, well then how do you draw? And I said, well, think of it this way. And he showed me there was a picture in the book of like a King Kong-esque gorilla destroying a city or climbing a building. and swatting at planes and stuff.
Yeah.
But the book taught you how to draw, like, first you draw the outline of his arm, and then you draw this shape from the arm to the head, and then you add the circles, and it was a very backwards work from the outside in instead of the inside out. And I was saying, no, well, think of it this way. Look at the head of that gorilla. Does it remind you of anything? Does it look like any particular shape? He's like, well, it kind of looks like a circle. I'm like, you're right, it is a circle. And what about his eyebrows? Is that big, thick eyebrow, kind of like Donkey Kong? What does that look like to you? He's like, it looks like a big rectangle. And I said, yeah, well, that's how you start. You break it down into basic shapes, especially for someone like him, he's just barely 10 years old. So you have to kind of show him. So I was kind of just showing him like the basics, but starting very simple, and then you work out from there. And he's like, oh, I get it. And he started to understand. It was kind of nice to see that he finally kind of got a hang of it.
Yeah.
And then that book, he just threw it aside. Like, it's like, this is garbage. So he actually was drawing better by the end of that day, just by applying what I told him and saying, like, well, look at that cup on the table. What does it look like to you? You see the straight lines aside, but the circles, and and I was telling him in a very kind of naive way about what perspective is and what volume is. Yeah. And it was that, but it kind of was like me reliving that from when I was in elementary school, finding that book, How to Draw Cartoons, because it really was just showing how to draw Fred Flintstone from an outline and then working inside. Yeah. And I always wondered why my drawings never were consistent.
Yeah, there was a ton of stuff like that, especially the bookmobile How to Draw stuff.
Oh, yeah, they were so cheap.
Yeah, and for me, it's like, I had a lot of them, but it for me, it was more interested in the result drawing than more than how it was made.
Ever see like
because it was just like basically it was just like line, shape, details.
Yeah,
that was the step
and then
by
it's
step.
like and there's like 3 or 4 steps, and then between 3 and 4 there's 50 million other steps that they don't talk about. And you're like, and then you have your lake, or it's like
and it's really not done like that at all.
No.
I mean, they really don't. A lot of these books don't really teach you about underdrawings. It's like when you sketch, you're basically coming up with the shapes first. Like you're drawing on the paper, and you're just kind of like lining out how you want to make the pose, or how you want to make like really just roughly coming up with what it is you want the end result to be in terms of like a pose. Yeah. And then you just kind of like work through that and put in the details later, and it's just like it's a process. It's not just like line, then it happens.
And it's strange because I've noticed that certain books, like I remember there was a time when Disney came out with a bunch of how to draw characters from the movie Bambi, how to draw Mickey and his friends, how to draw.
It's almost every single thing had something like that.
Yeah, but I noticed that
it's funny even
how to draw, but I realized because the way an animator draws Mickey Mouse is different than how a person, say, working in advertising or in consumer products draws Mickey. Yeah. Where there has to be a meticulous line and making sure everything is exactly on model. Yeah. But in animation, that really is not. It's not primary. It's a secondary thing. Yeah. So drawing the books teach you how to draw the characters, but in a very kind of backwards, stationary way, not in terms of movement. Which I wanted to be an animator, and that didn't teach me how to draw. It was the book showed you how to draw Bambi, which Bambi is a hard character to draw. To begin with. Yeah, exactly. So to draw it in a backwards way, like it was showing you, like, to draw Bambi's muzzle, you draw a circle. Bambi's muzzle is in a circle, and then you see the next drawing; it's got these flat edges as if you're cutting off the sides.
You almost like if you take those drawings and overlap them over each other, you'll notice that they kind of like go beyond what the actual drawing is.
So, in the first book that I got, and most animators will credit this book, was the Preston Blair animation book. Did you ever have the Preston Blair animation book?
I'm trying.
Warren Foster came out with. I think it was a Warren Foster book, because I had a version that was a compilation. Because there's a version, because Preston Blair was an animator.
Oh yes, no, I remember this. Yeah, this was the book that I was told to get in college.
Yeah, it's like, to me, as far as an animation book, it is the best starter book to get. It's a very, like
there's a Preston Blair book even before that, like early ones. Yeah, and this is like the book that like you'll all the drawings you'll see like in Russia or something used for advertisements.
I see them in Burbank. If you drive down Burbank, well, no one here, a lot of people here probably don't know Burbank because they're from outside of California.
LA.
But we live in Burbank, which is the animation capital of at least the United States. And all over town, I'll see Preston Blair's images from that book all over the place. Whenever you see a bulldog, an image of a bulldog at like a mechanics,
it's like that bulldog was used for like some high school mascot.
Same.
It still is.
Still is, and a lot of schools use the Preston Blair book. I mean, I saw recently it was a mechanics, but there was a picture of a running goat. And it was a goat that Preston Blair had in that book.
Yeah.
And the thing is, that version, there's two versions of that Preston Blair book. One was the one that he originally came out with in the late 40s, early 50s.
Right.
Which included...
1949.
Which included, characters that he designed while he was at MGM, and animated at MGM. The wolf, Screwy Squirrel, Droopy,
you
Tom and Jerry.
definitely see a lot of Screwy Squirrel in that.
Tom and Jerry, the owl and Bambi, because he animated a lot of the owl and Bambi.
Yep.
You see those in the book, and then later on they couldn't use the rights to those characters, so he had to draw over all those characters in the book. And so instead of seeing Tom or Jerry, you would see just a nondescript mouse and cat, or some other animal in its place. Yeah. So that's the version I had, was the latter, and I had one that was a compilation of 2 books, I guess he did, compiled, and it was a thick, soft cover, wide book. And I love that book. I wore those pages out. I mean, they're dog-eared to hell. Yeah. But it was my first major, animation. Because then there's other books like Illusion of Life, which is it's a quintessential, Disney animation book, is Frank and Ollie's Illusion of Life book.
Yeah. That book I actually haven't gotten until recently because, recently, I mean, probably 8 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
It was one of those books that I wanted to have, but
so
I could never find it. Well, that not only was it expensive, but I couldn't find it because it was around the time where it's everyone wanted to get into features. This is the book that you should get. You should get it now, immediately. And everyone got it, and I couldn't ever find a copy.
At least one that was cheap enough.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But for me, it was difficult to find. I'm sure there were copies out there that were just ludicrously expensive.
Oh God,
I never spotted them enough.
The problem is, I love the Illusion of Life. That was the first the Preston Blair book was definitely my first.
It's a really neat book.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
It's more of a philosophy and history book of how they handle those characters.
Yeah.
It wasn't a definitive animation tutorial book.
If anything, it's people should read that book just to get an idea of the thought process.
Yes.
And it's not a how-to book.
Right.
It's more of a process book of how things are kind of managed.
Also in terms of production, in terms of how they handle the character, getting into the personality of a character.
Yes, exactly.
From an animator's point of view, these guys who worked at the studio at that point, when they wrote that book, they had 40 years under their belt.
Yeah.
So, but then the thing about that book though is that if you buy a first edition, it's great. I don't have a first edition. I wish I did. But what happened was they didn't think the book was going to do well, supposedly.
Okay.
So what happened was they destroyed the blocks, the print. So when they recreated the book later, if you get a copy now, they're glorified photocopies, and some of them are not very good quality, and there's mislabeled things. Which is a shame because it's a beautiful book.
Yeah.
It's a big book. Yeah. It's 300 pages.
Yeah.
It's a big, thick
it's huge.
book.
It's
you
huge.
can kill someone with it. It's a huge book. But it's a great book. And then after that, probably what most animation schools recommend, usually 2 or 3 books.
The Animator's Survival Kit.
The Animator's Survival Kit by Dick Williams.
Yeah.
And probably the other one is usually Composing Pictures. I
think I've seen that one.
It's a good composition book. It teaches good about cinematography and composition.
Yeah.
I personally recommend it.
Right.
But the Richard Williams book is now what most people consider to be the quintessential animation how-to tutorial book. But I have a love-hate relationship with that book because I went to school and I had a lot of teachers, either that I took or I had, or ones that were in other classes that taught other classes, where they used Richard Williams' book as a syllabus, where they just took things right out of the book and they just said, look at the Richard Williams book and just animate from the book, which is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I mean, there's a lot of examples, especially in that book, where it's it's neat. You shouldn't really just trace that.
Yeah,
it's basically an idea. That's the thing about a lot of how-to books. It's it's not telling you to draw your own thing. It is basically telling you draw like this, and that's the biggest problem that I have with a lot of how-to drawing books. I like books that basically give you examples of things, and then they tell you try to come up with your own method using these ideas, and work with that. It's like, because not everyone has like a different style, everyone has like a different way to go about things, but you still need to know fundamentals.
Yeah.
So it's like, really, once you know these fundamentals, you have to utilize it for your own stuff.
Yeah.
So try to really use these as just as like a stepping stones to just keep moving on.
Right.
It's like, once you know this, then you can move on to the next step, and that's, it just...
Yeah. And there's some great books that came, like, if I have to say the next animation book that I've gotten outside of the Dick Williams book is Eric Goldberg's Character Animation Crash Course, which is not similar. It kind of jumps off of Richard Williams's book. You're looking it up?
Yeah, I'm looking it up, because I don't think I've seen this.
You've never seen it?
I don't think so.
The big Eric Goldberg fan, and you...
Oh, yes, this book. This is the book that I wanted, but I could never find.
Jeez.
And now I can find it. And
it's on Amazon.
Yeah,
Get
I know.
it.
No, now I have. But
yeah,
back then, when it's like, I don't know when Amazon started, but this was like when I was like just looking for books like at Barnes and Nobles and stuff like that. I could never find it, but I knew it was around, and I just I gave up.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite books. It's great because it teaches you, because the thing about how Eric Goldberg he talks about these things in the book, it's not like there's a lot of things in Richard Williams' book that are very technical. The thing about Eric Goldberg's book is that it's very like, hey, well, here's how you do it. And he talks in very layman's terms, very kind of like anyone can understand. And he makes it fun. And he shows examples, and it's really cool. And I would say, if I could recommend 3 animation books, quote unquote, it would be the Preston Blair book. Well, actually 4. The Preston Blair book, The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas L.A. Johnston, the Richard Williams Animator Survival Kit, and Eric Goldberg's Character Animation Crash Course book.
That's a good couple.
Yeah, and then anything outside of that, I think for general life drawing, there's the Andrew Loomis books on figure drawing and drawing hands and heads and things. There's Ken Holmgren's book, which is one of my favorite books, which is How to Draw Animals. Ken Holmgren was an animator. He animated a lot on Bambi. And so he does these beautiful drawings of how to draw cats and wolves and deer and cows and bears and everything. So it's a pretty decent book. And then there's general drawing books, which you have to kind of just... And then, there's a couple... I love the history, too.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to quickly, because I know you want to... there's probably some books that you want to recommend. But I love the history, too. So there's a lot of history books, especially on the Disney studio, which is good that now we're in an age where people are now starting to focus on other studios besides Disney. Yeah. But it's always good to see Disney books about animation and the history. They have their animations, the Disney Animation Studios collections of books which are focusing on design and layout and background. They have one about character animation, which shows really good drawings. There's Hans Bacher's Dream Worlds, which is a production design book. There's a lot of books. It would probably be easy for me to, now that I'm just trying to think of them off the top of my head, I would just love to just make a list.
Yeah.
And just post a list.
Yeah.
It might be easier for me and for everybody else to be like, what's this book? Hold on, let me write it down. Shit.
We can probably post them later on Facebook or something like that. So,
I'll write them down.
For me, I grew up with a lot of those Christopher Hart books, of course, I was talking about, and yeah, I had the not the Illusion of Life,
Preston Blair book.
I had the Preston Blair book. I got that before I went to college, and before that, I had the Richard Williams book. But then that disappeared. I don't know where that went.
Your copy, or
my copy? Yeah, I had a copy, and then before I went to college, it's that disappeared somewhere. So
someone stole it.
Yeah, probably. I told you about that. What someone stole my portfolio, right? Right out of my trunk.
Right out of your trunk of your car.
Yeah, it's and I didn't realize that until later, and I was like, hey, wait a minute, I had a portfolio back here.
Well, I hope they've
I'm sure
great success.
Oh yeah.
With your work.
Yeah, if I couldn't, I wasn't able to get a job with that portfolio, so I hope someone else did. But I had like a lot of. See, the thing is like everything that I had, like everything visual, like art books or comics or stuff like that, I worked off of that, and because. For me, I was breaking down a lot of like how this was done. I didn't really have someone who told me, through a tutorial what their process was. I kind of figured out the process myself, and I feel like that's a lot of people will do that. And while they're wrong, it is a way to find out for yourself how you want to draw something that looks like that.
Yeah.
So and sometimes it won't look right, but you learn through
trial and
error. And I had a lot of once I was taught that I should look into figure drawing. I was looking for classes for that, and figure drawing is really important. There wasn't really any books about it. However, at the time there were also a lot of how to draw manga books, and the early ones. Not a lot of them are great. They're all done by different artists, and they all have like their own different takes on how to draw stuff like that. So, and an illustrator's perspective, like that's what I was using, because I was interested in animation, but I was also really interested in comics. So that was really helpful to me. Looking at these books, I learned about perspective. I learned about posing. There is one how to draw manga book that is about figure drawing, and I really think that is probably one of the greater figure drawing books that I have found about figure drawing.
I have to see it. You have it here?
And yeah, I do. I'll show it to you later.
You guys can't see it.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's like now it's like I know more about like gesture drawings and roughing out poses. But this kind of like was the start of how I would learn about figure drawing and how I would go about posing things. And I was a little bit more rough about it, but in here it's like they break it down into shapes and angles and stuff like that, which was really helpful. So it was stuff like that. And recently I found a book because I really like to know about coloring styles and shading and stuff like that. One of the greatest books, and you're going to laugh about this.
Oh, you showed me this.
I showed you this. It's the Draw More Furries book.
I remember you showed me this book like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, why did you buy this? And then you show me the inside, and I'm like, the art in this is really good.
It's really good, and it goes about. It's by a bunch of different artists.
Yeah, I can tell.
And I know a few. I know a few of these artists, and they're really good at what they do, and they do a really fantastic job of breaking down their process. Just a little amendium. I meant to say that the book I was referring to is actually Furries Forever. It's probably the better of the three books. So if you want to actually look for that book, just look for that one. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think that's one of the probably the biggest things about tutorials is that breaking down a process of how to do something is really nice for someone who wants to learn how to come up with a look that they really appreciate, and they shouldn't really work off of this, but they should know that this is how this artist works, because you can I always hate it when artists like don't tell you about how they do something, because it to me it feels like, oh, they're scared about showing off, like there's some sort of secret element to it that no, it's not really that. It's like you are using a tool basically that you know how to use, and when you know how to use that, then you can just do whatever, and you should be able to share the tools that you use.
Yeah.
So it's like if I ask someone, it's like, oh, what kind of brush set do you use? And someone they'll tell me what brush set they use. I will look into that and I'll use them, and I'll be like, oh, hey, these are great. These work wonders for me.
Yeah.
I found out new ways to paint and draw with these tools that I haven't used before.
It wasn't even until the last year I hate drawing digitally, but it wasn't until the last even 8 months, 6 months ago, that I found brush sets because of recommendations from other people. That I'm like, oh my god, this is making me like enjoy drawing digitally.
Yeah,
because it's the closest thing to getting a real fun line or a great
and there's
texture.
people that they make their own brush sets and they share them, and that's I think that's really great because it's just a tool.
Right.
You know, it's you need to know how to use the tool. The tool doesn't use you.
Yeah.
You know, so
your work isn't going to get better just because I'm using the brush that
exactly.
so-and-so used.
Exactly. So when someone tells me, it's like, or someone asks me, it's like, oh, what's the program that you use? I tell them Photoshop, and I use this brush set and everything. It doesn't necessarily. It's not teaching you how to draw. It's just the tools that I use
to make you feel more comfortable to draw.
Yeah. So, and it is all about comfort. You know,
Right.
It's like you have to find that one. That's why everyone uses different programs. It's because that they're comfortable with those programs.
Yeah.
And those brushes and whatever. So it's like when you use that and you recommend it to someone, it's like it's not necessarily going to be what they're going to like or what they're comfortable with, but it's something to at least suggest. You know, so because that everything's a learning process.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And back to that Draw More Furries book.
Yeah.
That's the biggest. I remember looking at that book and being like, I want to get a copy of this book. I mean, it's really it's in that sense, it's really don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, because I was surprised because I'm like, look what I got in the mail, and I laughed first.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why'd you get that? And then you show me, and I'm like, oh, these are really good lessons inside this book.
Yeah.
Which is it was a pretty decent looking book. So
Yeah, and I would really suggest that to anyone if they really want to know about illustrations.
do they need to get the first book?
I actually got the first book, and it's not as good.
Just get the second.
Yeah, just get it's Draw More Furries. That's what it's called. So it's like that's honestly if I would recommend, because there's 3 of them out there. That's the one that I would recommend.
Is the third one Draw Even More Furries?
I have no idea. I forgot what it is. I think it's like Furries Forever or something like that.
That's yeah.
But yeah, it's
The
really,
worse the title, the better the lesson it teaches.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's like I love telling people about that book, and then they're laughing at me, and then when they actually look at the book, they're sort of like, oh wow, there's actually some really good things in there. And I'm like, yes.
Like first, honestly, no matter what something's called or the association with it, if it helps me learn and it helps me improve and it helps me become better at what I do, I don't care where I learn it from.
Yeah, exactly.
It's called I just want to get better.
It's just like it's just like from, you know, learning from an artist who probably has like a very, you know, troublesome background, or like is not very like well liked in the business. I won't say names, but I do know that there's a couple like blogs out there where they will discuss about animation processes and certain things to look out for in animation. And those are good lessons to take off from.
Yeah,
you know, it's
and not to let the personality of that person dictate whether what they teach has any validity.
Yeah, exactly.
In the sense of that,
yeah.
There are other things, but we won't get into that.
Yeah. But though I would say that those are the books that we kind of recommend to look into, and those are the kind of books that we grew up with, and. You know, if you look into them and like them and think that you can get something out of them, then feel free. We'll probably post some titles.
We'll post our
there.
personal list.
Yeah,
Andrew's will be about 5 books.
Probably.
Mine will be about 60 to 70 books. Because I have a bookshelf at home, and I realized I gotta get. I moved, and I gotta get a new bookshelf.
Yeah. For me, it's like it's not so much like how to draw books. It's more like I love looking at art books, and I just like looking at them and then kind of like try to emulate that kind of look for myself sometimes. So.
Sometimes it's just a book about an artist that will set you off. Like I just got a book I showed you earlier today. It was the Lost Art, or Disney's Lost Art.
Yes, that's right.
And it's these great concept painters or concept artists from the 30s, you know, Albert Herder, Gustav Tenggren, Richard Horvath, Bianca Majoli. Great early stuff, but it's just a book of their art. Like I have a friend of mine who loves Hirschfeld, and he's learned to draw by looking at Hirschfeld books. And so he's got Al Hirschfeld books, and people have painters' books and stuff. It's whatever inspires you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really what it is. It's really whatever gives you
It's
that little spark.
inspiration.
It's that spark that's like, There's nothing more invigorating to me than discovering something new and having that moment where you're like, oh, so that's how they did it. Yeah, like right now, I'm really into European comic artists. Mm-hmm. So like I'm looking at people because I never would have known about them because here in America we're very we don't really branch out. No. We don't try to we
get like translations like Lucky Luke and Asterix and stuff.
And I love
that,
Asterix,
but there's like so much more.
Right, that we will never ever
see. Yeah,
because we don't care in our country. We don't care about that crap.
Not so much.
But it's great that now at least we live in the age of the internet where you can go out and you can see.
That's another subject we should probably get into, like talking about European comics, because I think we have like quite a few that.
Well, there's a few.
I have quite a few that I've looked into. That
it's a shame. I haven't really had the time or really have taken the jump to really, because I know you've mentioned Lucky Luke. Mm-hmm. I've never read Lucky Luke.
Yeah.
But I've read all of Asterix and I love it. Mm-hmm. I've seen a lot of European Disney comics and I love them. I haven't seen too many, but I really want to. That's now I'm at the point where I'm now just going actively now seeking it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Through people's recommendations.
Yeah. All right. But, those are our recommendations, and if you like this, just give us a like, give us a subscribe,
spread the word,
and everything, and all that. Thanks so much.
Thanks.